A man's assertion that he is a woman is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member.
The person that is, the leader of my country, just to make this blanket accusation, it's hurtful.
He's basically saying if you're trans, you're deluded.
And obviously there's a blatant attack on trans women.
A lot of trans women that go into the military are quite masculine. The vast majority of them are autogynephiles. That would possibly make other women quite uncomfortable.
You are a transgender identified person. You are non-combat deployed.
Okay, so that is completely untrue.
For the trans people in the military now, what percentage of them are ideological, actually think they're women?
Beyond hormones, laser hair removal, Botox, lip injections.
I just feel like people are so bombarded with crazy
hair lowering, like literally.
Enlisted to transition, no other goal than that.
I mean, theoretically that is possible, but then again,
I wouldn't be able to join the military because of a medication I take.
But then I also know of trans women that they are very healthy, they take care of themselves, and
I'm very skeptical any male can be healthy without testosterone.
Give me the same opportunity that you give to anyone else.
Hey everyone, it is Jack. Welcome back to my channel, or if you are new, hello. Today is the final video on my 4-part series on Trump's executive orders surrounding gender ideology. Today, we're going to be discussing the military ban. And for this one, I thought I'd shake things up a little bit. So the following is a debate and discussion with Jake Ward. Jake is 32 years old from Chicago, and Jake transitioned 16 years ago and has been living a great life since. Jake has a YouTube channel, been on Buck Angel's channel, what I would describe as quite a base transsexual in terms of views, not like the crazy trans activists. So Jake has some very strong opinions about this, and I hope you enjoy the discussion. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this executive order, and then we can get into the discussion. So section 1 says that the United States military has a clear mission to protect the American people and our homeland as the world's most lethal and effective fighting force. The second paragraph says, recently, however, the armed forces have been afflicted with radical gender ideology to appease activists unconcerned with requirements of military service, like physical and mental health, selflessness, and unit cohesion. It's important service members are free of medical conditions or physical defects that may reasonably be expected to require excessive time lost from duty for necessary treatment or hospitalization. As a result, many mental and physical health conditions are incompatible with active duty, from conditions that require substantial medication or medical treatment to bipolar and related disorders, eating disorders, suicidality, and prior psychiatric hospitalization. So obviously that's going into some other disorders there, but this extra point here is quite an interesting thing to say. So consistent with military mission and long-standing DoD policy, expressing a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service. Beyond the hormonal and surgical medical interventions, adoption of a gender identity inconsistent with an individual's sex conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle, even in one's personal life. A man's assertion that he is a woman and his requirement that others honor this falsehood is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member. Now, that last point is quite, it reads to me as, I understand it, but I can imagine your position, it would feel very harsh. So let's talk about the whole thing. So I know that you have your own background tied to this. So where do you want to start?
Yeah. So I guess my skin in the game isn't necessarily just specifically as a trans guy, but as someone that has had aspirations to join the military and had been working through the recruitment process and was almost completed with the recruitment process when this order came down, and just to hear them make such blanket statements on, and just assuming that every trans person has the same struggles, the same issues, and that and just being like, well, just being trans in and of itself makes you permanently disqualified from military service. It's just, to me, it's very ignorant. It is very, very ignorant, and and it's disappointing because it's like I've gone through all the different barriers that is required of a trans person to join the military, because it actually is quite a rigorous process. I don't think a lot of people actually realize that. And it's like I've done everything to prove that I can meet the criteria, and that my status as a trans person does not impact my ability to serve and fight for this country, and for the the person that is, the leader of my country, just to make this blanket accusation, it's it's hurtful. I mean, it is hurtful because it's like, what more do I need to do? And it's just like,
Yeah.
and obviously there's a blatant attack on trans women, with the line about a man asserting that he's a woman and that everyone else has to agree with it. It's like, okay, it's like you're just blatantly attacking a group of people. It's like you're not. It's it's baseless. It truly is.
Mm. At this point, if you are still watching and not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you can help my channel reach as many people as possible. And also, while you're at it, hit the like button. You know you want to. Thank you for sharing that. And, my heart goes out to you with this change. I don't know how likely it is to come into effect or if there's going to be any wiggle room there, but I do think it must be really difficult to have put in all this work and potentially it not be viable. So, again, if this was kind of a case by case situation, it makes sense for me in your scenario, and I think it's really tough. I think, I'm not necessarily really strongly opinionated about this, I guess, but I'll try and challenge you so we can understand. Well, actually, so for me, it sort of makes sense, and I'm not saying that in a cruel way, but I looked up before this interview, what are other reasons you can be banned from the military? Or not banned, but you can't take part. And there are so many, what I would have thought quite trivial things, like medical conditions that are relatively mild if you say in comparison to the strong drugs that you're on and the procedures you've undergone, for example. In my case, I have no aspirations to join the military, nor would I probably be good enough. But in my case, I wouldn't be able to join the military because of a medication I take. Now, I still work out a lot. I have a very productive, busy lifestyle. My mental health is reasonably good. But to me, I read that and I was like, oh, right, that would be it then, because I just have to take this one thing. So if I compare it to my scenario, there will be so many guys that take the same medication as me and their condition is like completely under control and doesn't affect their life. But then they have this blanket ban because there are cases in which that's not true, or there may be scenarios where conditions worsen or better. So in that sense, I can understand it. So for me, it's less of a trans issue, and maybe it's more reflective of the wider criteria, because surely if this is the case for you, then there are other medical conditions and disorders and medications in which actually probably the majority of them would be fine, but they're doing this ban to make it kind of easier. So would you sort of agree with that when you, because for you, you're saying it's not fair, but then there probably are lots of other people also saying it's not fair because they're not trans, but they have something else that's relatively minor.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's why for a lot of those conditions, there are different waiver processes that you can utilize, because there is a laundry list of things that are considered a disqualifying condition as far as the military is concerned. But then for a lot of those things, there is a process where you can provide supporting documents from like your doctor and your various care providers that shows, okay, yes, I have this condition, but it is manageable, and you have the opportunity to basically be reviewed on a case by case basis, where then they will
Right.
allow you to get in even with having that condition, because that's basically because of the different procedures and things that I've had done, because I am on a medication that I do need to continue to have access to. So
Yeah.
that's basically what my recruiter's working through right now, is we've provided all of those supporting documents to show it's like, okay, yes, there are these kind of red flags in my medical history. Here's why they shouldn't be considered a problem. And
Mm.
so that's what we're working through right now. So it's like, yeah, there are definitely plenty of different conditions that the military is like, well, we would rather someone not have that condition, but it's like, but we do have a waiver process that allows a person to be considered on a case by case basis.
Yeah. Yeah, because for example, my boyfriend has type 1 diabetes, which is
Hmm.
kind of just the rare type you get randomly. They don't really understand what causes it.
Hmm.
Now, for him, I would imagine his condition is harder than yours because of how he fluctuates throughout the day and has bad days and good days. So maybe that does make sense. But, do you think that that's an example of something that's fair to just, because that's also something you can't have that if you're in the military. Do you think something like that, it's fair to kind of have a blanket ban?
Because I know with diabetics, it does depend. I know from what I remember, if as long as you're not insulin dependent, they say you can sometimes get a waiver for diabetes. It's when you're insulin dependent that it becomes a bigger issue. Because if you're in a situation where you don't have access to your insulin because the
Yeah.
supply truck is running late or whatever, and it's like then you can die. You go into anaphylactic shock and you die from that, and which is definitely
Yeah.
not a good thing. And we certainly
Every
don't.
type 1
But if you're
is
a person,
insulin dependent.
yeah. Yeah, so it's not so it would be more so because your boyfriend is insulin dependent that it creates a bigger issue because yeah, if he goes without his insulin for so long, he's dead. Whereas for me, if I miss my testosterone, I'm not feeling great, I'm not having a good time, but I'm not going to die. So
Does it not,
there's
is it
less of
not
a
really dangerous
danger.
though? Is it not really dangerous for you to quit cold turkey? Like, what if you were in a scenario abroad where you all of a sudden were cut off access for like 3 weeks, like from 100 to 0%? Is that not dangerous to just randomly quit it?
I mean, it's not a good thing. I would definitely not be feeling my best, but my body's not going to just shut down and stop working, because I've been on it for so long. And
Right.
it's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to have fatigue and I'm going to be more sluggish and things, but it's not necessarily going to stop me from doing what I need to do. Because actually, I did run into a situation where I was changing doctors, and so I was without my testosterone for over a month. And yeah, I didn't feel great, but I was still functional. It's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
you feel like crap. You feel like crap, but your body will still function and it still does what it needs to do. So it is a little bit of a different scenario, and it's honestly kind of a middle ground that I would be agreeable to is that maybe because of certain concerns or people with certain health conditions, they restrict them from certain roles within the military, usually things that are directly combat oriented, where you're going out into the field for weeks, possibly months at a time, where you're basically kind of camping out in the middle of nowhere and you don't have access to certain things. And so then maybe we don't put a trans person in that kind of a role, but then a trans person could be in like an administrative type of role, or they're like an IT person, someone that's working in an office all day, that they're going to be on a base or something where there's going to be doctors and nurses and access to medication, to where then it is less of a concern
Mm.
having that person there.
So
So it's like
it's
that could be a
even
potential middle ground that I might be agreeable, that I would definitely be agreeable to.
right. So it's even those roles that they're not supposed to take
Yeah.
part in.
So if there's a yeah, so if another ban actually comes down, then yeah, it's literally no trans people whatsoever. If you are trans, you're out. So
Right.
but maybe that could be a middle ground that could be reached as the process of negotiating different things. I know there are lawsuits that are in the works right now trying to fight against the potential ban that has been presented, and it does get very it's there's going to be a lot of negotiating back and forth because this happened the first time when Trump presented a ban during his first term in office.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of negotiations in court and things like that, and basically the compromise they had to come to was the ban stopped any new trans people from joining, but any trans people that were already in the military, they were left alone. That was the compromise that they came to. That was basically the only compromise the court system was going to allow, because otherwise they were just going to stop it altogether.
Right.
So
Yeah, I got you. So I've seen lots of videos about this on X, people saying that if you are trans and in the military, you cannot be deployed. So do you think,
that's no that's completely incorrect. I know of multiple trans people that transit that have been transitioning or have transitioned while they've been in the military. They've deployed and done all of those things. I think where people get confused, they hear the word deployment and they automatically think combat. They think someone that is actively going into a combat situation. That is not the only types of deployments the military does. All kinds of different jobs in the military have to deploy. So I think that's the misconception, is that deployment does not always mean you're going into a combat situation.
Right. But
So,
so
and
in
there are trans
regards
people that
to
have been
combat,
on deployment and things like that.
in regards to combat though, people who've medically transitioned, is that something they currently can't do?
No, they can currently. Right now there is no blanket policy on trans people can't serve in a combat role. That because the current policy that is still in effect, because the executive order doesn't change policy. That's not how executive orders work. But right now, a trans person can serve in any role, or they're given the opportunity, I should say, to serve in whatever role they would like to serve. And now, if they have some other type of issue that the military is like, well, no, we don't want you in a combat role, but then it's going to be for a completely different thing. It's not related to them being trans.
Right. Yeah, I think, do you mind if I play you one of these clips? Because I think it's
Sure.
obvious that there doesn't seem to be a consensus on this online, and I know nothing about this stuff.
So Trump just signed an executive order banning transgender people from the military. Let me tell you what this means. First of all, number one, and this is what a lot of people don't realize, there are upwards of 15,000 trans people that are serving, quote unquote, in the United States military right now. The first thing that I'm going to tell you is that all of these people are non-deployable. What that means is that if you are a transgender identified person that is, quote unquote, serving in the United States military right now, you are non-combat deployable. So these people cannot deploy to combat theaters. When the United States is involved in any sort of conflict overseas, transgender people literally cannot be deployed. What this means is that they are at 80 to 100% disability. And so now, what that means is that they are on the taxpayers, they're on the hook, taxpayers are on the hook, excuse me, for $200,000 to $300,000 per year annually of quote unquote transgender healthcare, which is also covered by the VA.
Okay, so that is completely untrue. As a person that is trying to join the military, I've made connections with trans folks that are in the military currently, and I know of several that have deployed into combat situations. And so that is completely untrue, saying that trans people are not deployed. I'm not sure how that rumor keeps getting circulated amongst the conservative side of the argument, because that's not true at all.
Okay.
So, so, so,
Yeah, it must.
yeah, that's it's flat out not true, because again, I know people that have gone into deployment and have been in a friend of mine, he's security forces for the Air Force, and he literally was in Afghanistan deployed doing what
Right.
needed to be done, so
Mm.
in a combat zone. So
Yeah.
it's just flat out untrue. So, but again, combat roles are not the only jobs that deploy. And you can be someone that isn't actually going out into the field and doing the actual war fighting, but you're still participating in a deployment in other ways. And I don't see why a trans person should be excluded from that. Now, given there are trans people that are serving in combat roles right now, and they're doing their jobs just fine. I guess my thought process is trying to find kind of that middle ground that might make both sides happy. It's like, okay, you've got the conservatives that say trans people shouldn't be in at all. And then you've got the very liberal that are like, well, no, trans people should be in, and they should be able to do whatever job they want, providing they meet the criteria for said job. And so it's like, well, maybe we meet in the middle. And it's like, there's already certain medical conditions where you can be in the military, but they exclude you from certain types of jobs just for
Yeah.
safety reasons, and you're being able to be effective in that job. So it's like, why don't we do the same thing for trans people and just say, okay, we keep trans people out of combat jobs, but we let
Right.
them do other things, because there are literally hundreds of other things to do in the military that is not combat oriented.
Yeah.
Most of the jobs in the military are not combat oriented. It's like we need healthcare people and administrative people and tech people, and or
Yeah.
someone like my dad in the Navy. He did intel. Plenty of things to choose from that are not combat oriented.
Mm. Yeah, that does make sense. And it's good to speak to you, because I think with all these gender issues, so many of us talk about it online. It's easy to think of trans as this kind of nebulous concept when, people are criticizing the stuff crazy people say and all of that. And I think with this issue, it's a lot easier to have empathy for someone in a situation like yourself just speaking to you instead of just
Mhm.
saying, yep,
Right.
that makes sense. It's a medical thing. They have no business being there. I think it's quite easy for people to jump on that. And I think with his comment, Trump's comments about, he's basically saying if you're trans, you're deluded and you're obviously not psychologically fit to be in a reality-based job and then requiring other people to affirm that reality. So it sounds really harsh the way he said it. If I try and lean into where that's come from, it's sort of like now, unfortunately, voices like yours are not the ones people are hearing because I feel the majority of trans people that are speaking publicly, think of people in the media like Laverne Cox. There's a lot more of them. Um, they toe the line. Think of all the drag race stars, though, I know most of them aren't
Mhm.
trans. They're towing the line with sports, kids transitioning, you know, going into female spaces, no matter what stage of your transition you're at, all of these things. So I just feel like people are so bombarded with craziness and like the trans women are women that it's very hard for me to understand. And I'd be interested to hear your take on this. For the trans people in the military now, like what percentage of them are ideological and actually think they're women and, will try and get someone cancelled if they use the wrong pronoun? I would hope that people in the military have a bit of a bigger backbone, but a lot of the trans women I've seen who are ex-military, and for some reason autogynephilia is quite, there seems to be a pattern of some men being ex-military and doing that. Some of them have been unhinged in terms of like, I am a woman, all the usual crap. So I think where that's
Right.
coming from with Trump's comment is like, I just wonder how common it is to meet someone like you who just gets it, is with reality, is not really requiring people to affirm anything because you're confident in who you are. Because if there are people in the military who do have this kind of ideological obsession, then perhaps it would get in the way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a very fair point. I would say, at least from the ones that I've personally come across that are in the military currently, that, they're confident in who they are, but they understand that when you make that commitment to serve your country, you put yourself to the side and you do whatever you need to do to get the job done. And if that means sometimes you have to deal with someone maybe using the wrong pronoun or this, that, and the other, you just got to get over it.
Mm.
Because ultimately the decision to serve means you agree, you make an active choice to, you put yourself to the side. You as an individual, that sits way in the back of the bus. Your focus
Yeah.
is to be part of a cohesive unit that is there for a collective purpose, and that is to serve. And that is, whatever the mission is, that is your number one priority. Everything else is it sits in the back. And it's like
Mm.
it's and yeah, I've heard of people, yeah, it's difficult. If they're, if someone uses the wrong pronoun, it's like they don't like it. It doesn't make them feel good, but they don't throw a tantrum over it either. It's like they understand. It's like some people don't get it, and that's just how it is. But it's like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you still gotta you gotta tough it out and do your job because that's what you're there for. And that's really just myself as someone trying to join, and other people that are already in. They're like, we're just asking to be given the same opportunities that everybody else does. It's like, I'm not saying it's like you automatically have to let me in because I'm trans and I get special privileges. It's like, no, I'm just asking, give me the chance to come to the table, show you what I have to offer, and let me prove that I can do what is expected of someone that is going into the military.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like if we had the political will in the West to not to have never bought into kind of the pronoun police, the gender
Hmm.
ideology in all of our institutions, if the message was, look, if you want to make these decisions for your body, we can do that, but this does not mean you are going to be able to do X, Y, Z. It doesn't mean you can make demands from women or, if someone does not respect your decision and does not wish to acknowledge how you feel by using a different pronoun. That's never going to be a reason someone loses their job. You're not going to be able to bully someone. Like if that was the attitude we had, which I think is a healthy one, because it teaches people to have self-respect and to find happiness within instead of it all being based off the external. I feel like the people who've actually transitioned would probably be a lot more reasonable, because the other ones just wouldn't be cut out for it. They would be like little babies, just demanding everything from society. And
Yeah.
I think the issue now is that it's just so hard to separate the ideology, because on a case by case basis, you seem like someone that would just be absolutely fine. Then how would a case by case basis work? You think, do we screen people for these like trans women are women kind of obsessive natures? And then what about, I don't know how it would work in the military in terms of sleeping arrangements and stuff like that. And again, we have this trans man versus trans woman difference, right? Because I would gather a lot of the men wouldn't care. But I also recognize like a lot of trans women that go into the military are quite masculine, and I would stipulate the vast majority of them are autogynephiles. So, that would possibly make other women quite uncomfortable, and then they would feel pressured not to admit that because they'd feel like they're disrespecting a colleague.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess something that gives me a little bit of comfort, because there's been different iterations of policy that has allowed for trans people to be in the military, and so because the initial policy that came out under the Obama administration was actually a little more relaxed than the policy we have now that was initiated under the Biden administration. Because the previous policy, it's like, okay, your documents needed to be updated, and you needed to be on hormones for at least a year, but beyond that, it was kind of open ended as far as like if you were still in the process of having surgeries, things like that. It was a little more flexible. The current policy that we have now, it specifically stipulates you need to be completed with your transition. Basically, your documents need to be updated. You still need to hormones for at least a year. It needs to be you need to have had all of your surgeries completed. Now, it doesn't define what surgeries you have to have. They leave that up to each individual, but and this was something I had to do. Both my primary care physician and I had to provide a signed statement saying my transition is completed. I will not be seeking any other surgeries once I enter the military. Because there was also
Right.
the notion of, well, we should not be paying for people to get the military should not be paying for people to get their gender change. They should not be paying for these procedures and having to be taken out for recovery periods and things. And so that was a stipulation that the current policy added in that was different from what was created under the Obama administration. Is that no, if someone wants to join the military and they've transitioned, that's fine, but they need to be completely done. So that way, when they enter the military, they're ready to go, and we're not going to be having to worry about them having surgeries and different things like that. And so,
Mm.
and so I think in that sense, it does make it a lot more reasonable. I
Right.
guess now, are there people in the military that have gotten procedures and things taken care of? Yes. Part of that, though, is because it's only the current version of the policy that has made the requirement of transition being completed, because the Obama policy didn't have that rule. And so, and especially if it was someone that they got in while under the Obama policy, but then Trump made his ban that blocked new people, but other people that were already in were allowed to stay. So then they were allowed to continue with their transition and having surgeries and things like that. So
Right.
it gets complicated because we've had different versions of different policies, and every time the rules changed, but then there were people that were in under one set of rules, and now the rule changed, but we still hold them to what the rules were when they first joined, and so it does get a little complicated there.
Mm. Yeah, interesting you raised that point, because I have two quite funny clips here to show you about. Yeah, I'll just play them and then see what you think.
Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful to be serving at this period of time. Being able to undergo a full gender transition beyond hormones, laser hair removal, Botox, lip injections, hair lowering, like literally cannot be more thankful to be alive now.
Okay. I'm going to show you the other one.
Welcome to part 1 of my series documenting the transition of a man in the military, specifically the Navy, is the route that I went. This started back in 2017. I enlisted to transition, no other goal than that. And I come from a very conservative state. I come from Florida. So, I could kind of feel which way the wind was blowing even back then. And almost immediately, I went to medical and I asked to be referred. And within a week, I was talking to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Really all it was is I go to a therapist, do a quick consultation, and then the next time, it was basically she asked me questions, marked some boxes, and said, why, yes, you're trans. Medically guaranteed. However, in the Navy, that comes with its own obstacle, because depending on what you do will depend on if you immediately go to a ship or if you go to just a building where you're going to be working. And I had to go to a ship first. So they said, wait for shore duty. It'll be a lot easier, because turns out when you start transitioning, when you get hormones, you're then put in a non-deployable status, which means that you can't go on a ship, that you would be deemed to be basically in danger of a medical emergency that they won't be able to treat.
Right. So the first one was really short, but I think what they were saying was they were so grateful to be in the military now because they're getting all these things paid for.
Yeah, and it speaks to, when did that person join? What was the policy at the time? Could they have possibly entered the military and there was no history of them being trans, so they had not done anything to pursue a transition, and then they announced while they're already in the military that, well, hey, actually I'm trans, I want, I want to transition. So yeah, and with having some of these different examples, because what the policy is written for is for someone that has already started transitioning, or it's basically someone that has already basically come out as trans and are going to be going through some type of transition process or have already gone through a process. So, but theoretically, yes, it could be possible that someone, they already know that they're trans, but they're just not going to say anything. So then they can just get in and joining as their biological sex. And then later on, when they're already in the military, they're like, well, I'm trans and I want to go through the process of transitioning. So, I mean, theoretically that is possible, but then again, that's been possible even, it's, and so yeah, because that is a tricky situation.
Do you think it's fair for someone to say, look, I don't mind someone trans being in the military, but I don't want my tax dollars spent on, lip filler, Botox, surgery. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I would say some of those things the military should not be paying for and covering. That's because to me that goes beyond just basic things that a person does when they transition. That to me gets into the realm of being full blown cosmetic elective things. It's like it's like it may help you feel a little bit better about yourself, but that's not really something that you need to do to transition. That's extra. That's your personal decision because there's a certain aesthetic you are trying to achieve at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I would be there saying, "Where's my Botox?"
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not trans.
Exactly. Yeah, and now, given even the folks that have gotten these things accomplished, I do, and it's just because of people that I've spoken with that are in the military that have had transition related care provided for them while being in the military. It is a pretty lengthy process to get that stuff approved. They're not just you can't just be like, well, I want this surgery, and then you just get it exactly when you want it. They're going to be like, well, it has to be done at a time that's convenient for us, and there is a. I guess I'm a little concerned with that second individual saying that they transitioned literally right after they got into the Navy, and then some Navy medical people it's like, oh yeah, you're trans, we're going to approve you to start your transition. That's a little concerning because I would think the military would be a little more thorough than that. So
it seems
but that's more, I guess that's that's that particular person's situation. I would say that's not necessarily the norm.
Yeah.
I think that person may have just gotten paired up with a very open-minded, very left-leaning healthcare person that was just like, yeah, I'll just, I'm just going to wave you on through this process. That's fine.
It seems to me like to reach a common ground, stuff like that would need to be stamped out and also condemned, as in, if that's not the protocol, then whoever signed that off should lose their job. Do you know what I mean? It's like if the military has guidelines and standards and they're going to make this work, they need to have them fully enforced so that people take it seriously.
Yeah, because honestly, it should be a similar criteria to what they expect of someone like myself who's trying to join the military that has gone through a transition. So I guess, and hearing that that person, it's like, oh well, you're considered non-deployable during, for a certain period of time when you start hormones. I guess now I'm seeing where some of that misconception is coming from, because in the very beginning of transition they do put you in a non-deployable status, so it's like, okay, now
Right.
those dots are starting to connect now. Well, for someone like myself who's trying to join, I already have to be past that point of, because they want you to be on hormones for at least a year, and then as far as surgeries, it's at least 18 months after your last surgery before you are eligible to join. So all those things that they are accounting for someone that's brand new, so that I would hope would be agreeable to someone that has concerns about a trans person being in the military. Well, I think
Mm.
it's the people that are already in and are getting procedures done. It is creating some challenges that where it's like, but what if you're someone like me, already done? Literally, the only thing they have to do for me is just give me my testosterone, which there's lots of different reasons why people take medication, and the military provides it for them, and it's not considered an unreasonable thing to need. It's like women are given birth control while they're in the military, which is a daily use medication, and it's like there are plenty of things that the military already accommodates for non-trans related things. So it's like, what's wrong with a person like me, and a person that would be willing to not go into a combat role if it was decided that, hey, we really don't think that that's an appropriate position for you to be in? I'm fine with that. I'm not even interested in the combat role anyway. So,
Yeah.
it's like,
Mm.
it seems like there is a place to meet in the middle. So why can't we do that?
And I'm glad you just said that point about the medication, because it kind of brings me nicely on to my last argument anyway, unless you have more, is that the trans man versus trans woman is a very different thing once again in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Because speaking to therapists who treat, who have patients who have transitioned, detransitioned, or have gender dysphoria and have not transitioned, I've heard from quite a few of them that male to female tend to struggle a lot more in life than people like yourself, female to male. And then the
Mm-hmm.
theory behind that is like, if you're in a male body and you basically remove your testosterone, it can cause so many psychological ailments like anxiety, poor sleep, brain fog, depression, you know, lack of productivity, lower muscle mass, bone issues. So, and then on the flip side, they say the trans patients they see who are female to male tend to do a lot better in life, in terms of their productivity, their career. They may just kind of have normal mental health struggles like any other average person. And testosterone is actually kind of an antidepressant. It's an enhancer. Like it enhances your capability of what you can do with your body. So that's something I think should be looked into, because I do notice a lot of trans women seem to kind of decline in terms of the older they get, and some of them just seem to be getting more and more deranged. I mean, they're in all the activism stuff, but it does seem to me like more trans women struggle mentally. And it's just, to use the term cis, quote unquote, men, if they have a condition that gives them low testosterone, like they need to get TRT because they have depression, anxiety, poor sleep, brain fog, all that stuff I told you about. So then if you're purposefully removing testosterone from a male body, like surely that's not, in your case, it's actually enhancing your body. But for a man, like that's really diminishing what he can do with his body, and having a healthily functioning body. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and I think that that is where we do need to treat people as individuals and not just put out a blanket thing where it's like, okay, if this is your situation, then it's an automatic decision at that point, and it's no, because because yeah, are there trans women that their health does decline over, as they progress through transitioning and lo- longer periods of time with being on estrogen and things like that. But then I also know of trans women that they are very healthy, they take care of themselves, and this, that, and the other, and they're able to perform just fine. A trans woman that I know of, she's a Navy pilot, and they actually took away her flight clearance for while she was going through her transition because they weren't sure how she was going to be able to perform after after being on the estrogen and surgery and things like that. But then they later on they gave her the opportunity to go through the same rigorous testing that everyone that wants to be a Navy pilot has to go through in terms of psychological testing, physical testing. And she was able to meet the requirements and she was able to earn back her flight clearance. So, but
Right.
again, it wasn't just given to her. She had to be reevaluated like she did initially before transition, go through all the same testing, and she was able to pass all of the testing and was able to be requalified as a pilot. So I think that's where
Mm,
it's like we need to allow people to come to the table and show can they do it or can they not.
mm. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, I need to speak to more trans women because I'm just so curious about this effect of estrogen, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's funny when gay men transition because they go from being kind of in a community where sex is just the sole focus to then, having very little sex drives. So, I'm very skeptical that any male body can be healthy without testosterone. Like you say, she's taking care of herself. Well, that may be the case when it comes to sleeping, eating, mental, all of that
Mhm.
stuff. But I'm very skeptical any male can be healthy without testosterone. So that's just about I don't know. I don't know enough. I'm trying to find out.
Sure.
Yeah. So do you have anything else you wanted to add, Jake, on this topic?
Um, yeah, I think I think it's just keeping it very simple. It's like I'm not asking for any special privileges or special treatment or to be given any anything. It's just like just let me give me the same opportunity that you give to anyone else to show that myself and any other trans person for that matter can meet the same standards that they hold everyone else to, because I understand what the commitment means to serve your country. And and I'm not joining to make a political statement. I'm not joining to to have free transition services or anything like that. It's just like I'm joining because I want to serve and I just want to prove that I can meet the same standard as everybody else. you know yeah,
Yeah.
and and again, putting me in a male space, I physically I match with everyone else, so I'm not going to make anybody uncomfortable or ask anything weird or make any unreasonable demands of anybody. I'm just going to blend in, do me, and the trans stuff, it'll only be brought up if it absolutely has to, and most of the time it doesn't. So what,
Hmm.
I don't see what the justifiable reason is to exclude someone like me from the military.
Well, I've really appreciated this conversation. And to be honest, you have opened my mind more to this issue and changed my mind a little bit. All I can say, at least, is in your case, I really wish you the best. And I hope it works out for you. I genuinely do. Because I can see how deeply you've thought about this. And it does really suck, if this ends up being the case. It's just one of those situations in life that sucks. And I think potentially this could have been something we could have solved without all of this backlash from the crazy activists. So it must be really tough to kind of have not been one of those people and then see the ramifications of what's happening. So, I really do appreciate that. And like I stand by you definitely in this conversation. And hopefully more people will feel emboldened to kind of just find the middle ground. I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's definitely my hope that, that we can keep moving forward, and haven't gotten any bad news from my recruiter yet that anything has been stopped at all. So it's like, all right, we're just taking it one day at a time. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, you'll have to keep me updated. So, Jake, do you have, I know you create some YouTube videos and stuff. Do you have anything online you'd like people to look at to see more from you?
If they want to take a look at my my YouTube channel, it's been a while since I posted anything, just to hear some of my other thoughts on things. You can find me on Buck Angel's channel. I've got a couple of videos that I've been in on there. We actually just did a live talking about the military topic earlier this
Oh,
week.
nice. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I'm around. I'm around, and I'm absolutely open to having conversations with people. If there's other creators that would like to have me stop by on their channel, definitely open to it. And because my thoughts are, as a trans person, I want to show that I just want to be a part of the rest of society. I don't want to combat it. I don't want to, rip it apart and all these other crazy things that these activists have turned the trans community into. It's like, I want to be a part. I want to be able to come to the table and sit and have a cup of coffee with you and it's just normal. And, we can just coexist, and it doesn't have to be this weird, awkward thing. It's like, just see me as a person. That's all.
I would see you as a person for sure if we were friends in real life, or maybe I'll meet you one day. So yeah, thank you so much,
Sure.
Jake. I appreciate it. It's been absolutely great. And yeah, have a great day.
Yep, you too.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that debate with Jake. Jake really got me thinking, and I feel far more open-minded to this now. I do understand that it is a harsh blanket ban, and we could be considering people case by case. Like I said, I think there is a big difference between trans men and trans women for all the reasons I outlined, and that is just the reality of it all. Unfortunately, because of how much the trans activists have demanded from society and how much they have ruined the gay rights movement and women's rights movement and just general human rights, we're now seeing this large backlash. So at the same time, I do understand where it's coming from, but all in all, I wish Jake all the best. I hope Jake can dream in being in the military, and I'm very curious to know what you guys think. Do you think there's a middle ground we can reach here? Can we take things case by case basis? Do you think the whole thing is unfair? Or maybe you are the blanket ban group and you just think no person who's transitioned should be in the military? Please let me know. And with that said, I will see you soon for another video. Bye.